everyone, this is Dawn. Welcome to my YouTube channel. Today I'm going to show you how to make a couple of cards using some mixed media and the Serenity card making stamp set. So this is the stamp set. I'm going to use the wreath and then all the extras on the wreath, and also I'm going to use the Mary thin cut from Mary Borders, and I'm using the stencil from Stencil Pack 3. So let's get started. I'm going to cut a piece of white daisy cardstock at 4 by 5 1/4, because I'm going to put a scarlet base on my card. So I'm using some of this pixie spray. It's a low tax spray for stencils, and I'm spritzing it on the back of my stencil. Well, it can be either side. There isn't really a front or a back. So one side of the stencil, and then I'm going to place it down on my white daisy cardstock. And then I'm going to tack the whole stencil to my splat mat. And then I'm going to use some mustard seed distress oxide ink. And I'm going to blend this around on the stencil. And I'm just working that color in to each of those lines on the stencil. Okay, so now I'm going to clean up my stencil and pull it up from my white daisy cardstock, and I'll just wipe everything down real quick. And then I'm going to place my stencil back onto my art panel, and I'm going to shift those lines just a little bit to the right to create another line in between each of those mustard seed blended lines. So now I'm going to use some of this Stickles glitter gel, and this is a thick gel, and it really is like a gel. It's almost rubbery. It's got a strange consistency. It's not like a regular glitter paste, but it works the same. You just spread it out on the top of your stencil, and I'm taking my time because this gel has chunks of glitter, and it's got actual stars, gold stars in it. This one is Solar Flare, and it's so cool. It's got tiny little stars. So I'm taking my time and working it around and making sure that I get several of those stars to go into the lines on this stencil. If I'd used a stencil that had more of an open design, it probably wouldn't have taken quite so long, but I just took my time and worked all these little stars in so that I could take advantage of as many of them as I could on the top of my stencil. I'm also leaving it rather thick. I'm not scraping it off so that I can have those thick lines of glitter on my design. So now this Serenity Wreath design, it works the best if you cut first and then stamp. I usually stamp and then cut, but in this case, it's easiest to cut your white daisy paper out with the thin cut first and then do your stamping. And then I'm taking the Mary sentiment from Mary Borders, and I'm cutting that out. I'm using the scarlet glitter paper. Okay, so now I'm going to cut my base for my card, and that's at 4 1/4 by 5 1/2, and that's going to create a scarlet border around the edges of the card. And now it's time to start stamping. Okay, so the easiest way to stamp this image is to take your carrier sheet and line everything up according to the lines on it, and then you'll be all set up to stamp correctly onto that cutout piece. So I'm just inking up the wreath image, and I'm using Clover ink for the base color. And I'm just inking it up, and then you look through your block and place so that each of those leaves are kind of in those cut out places on your thin cut piece. And then I'm going to take evergreen ink, and there's this smaller stamp that has like an outline of each of those leaf images. And so you just stamp over it in each of those sections along the pattern. So I'm just stamping and turning so that I have an outline all around. And then I'm going to use some green apple ink, and there are a couple of, I don't know, they're tiny little branches of like pine needles, and one stamp goes one direction so that you can do it on the outside of the wreath, and then the other stamp, it's the same but it's in the other direction so that you can stamp it on the inside part of the wreath. And it's a very subtle effect, but it fills out that wreath and it looks really cool after you're done. So I'm just stamping all around with those two stamps. And then this last one, I'm using some toffee ink, and it's kind of twig and berries. And so I'm stamping those all around too. And it kind of fits if you look for the edges of that cutout. You can figure out where those little berries can fit. And so I'm stamping that all the way around. So we have a very full wreath. Okay, so now I'm taking some scarlet ink and I'm going to stamp my bow on that cutout bow image. And then the last thing is the Merry Christmas. It's the Christmas sentiment to go with that Merry cutout. And I'm going to stamp that in evergreen, and then I'll fussy cut that bit out. Okay. So now I'm going to bring my Big Shot back in because I forgot this step, and I'm going to cut that wreath out again with evergreen cardstock. And that is going to layer underneath my wreath, because when those little pop outs are folded up, then you'll see the green underneath it. It gives it a lot of dimension and texture. Okay, so I'm just kind of laying things out to figure out where stuff is going to go. So these are metallic pens that are from Spectrum Noir, and I'm just dotting little red dots on those berries that that image that I had stamped in toffee. I'm just going over the little berries with this red ink in teensy tiny dots. Okay, and now I'm going to fold up my thin cut, the cutouts on this wreath. I'm going to fold them all up to give it some dimension, and then you'll see that evergreen cardstock underneath it. And then I'm just going to glue it down using Tombow Aqua glue, little dots of glue on the places that are going to be flat to the card. Okay. And then I'm going to go ahead and cut out and fussy cut that Christmas sentiment. Super quick. And that's all ready to go. Okay, so now I'm going to take my card base, and this is going to be a landscape top fold card, and I'm going to attach that scarlet cardstock using some Tombow tape runner. Get that down, and then my art panel is going to get glued to that card front using Tombow as well. And now I'm going to take some of this Christmas Red Stickles glitter glue, and I'm going to place it on my bow, and then I've got a teensy tiny paintbrush, and I'm going to spread that the stickles around and kind of paint with it to give my bow some extra bling and glitter. It's a really pretty color, and it's really pretty layered with the scarlet ink underneath. So I'm just painting carefully along the lines there. Now I'm going to pop my wreath on my card front with some thin 3D foam dots. And then I'm going to also pop the Merry sentiment. I put them underneath the center letters, and then I'm going to glue the M and the Y direct to the wreath using some Tombow aqua glue. Get that placed down, and then I'm also going to pop the Christmas sentiment with the thin 3D foam dots. And then the last step is to add that bow with a foam dot as well. So that's my card, and I'll have some close-up shots in just a sec. I love all the texture and interest to this card. Okay, so now I'm going to make another card, and it's going to be the same exact design, just the background, the mixed media background is going to be different. So I'm using this stencil, it's from Tonic. I'm using my pixie dust spray and giving it a spritz so it has some tack to it, and then I'm going to place it down. And in retrospect, I probably should have done it the other direction, but this worked. Meaning so that it could be landscape and have more of the snowflakes on my card panel, but it worked out, so I'll just keep that in mind for next time. So I'm using distress oxide ink called Tumbled Glass, and I'm just inking up on this stencil so that my snowflakes are kind of a light blue. And just pouncing and working that color into all of these snowflake images. And then I'm going to take some of the Stickles glitter gel, and I'm going to spread that out on top of the snowflakes so that they are glittery. And it's kind of a transparent, it's called moon dust, and it can be transparent, or you could leave it white, like for snow, and but it'll take on whatever color you ink underneath it. So I wanted my snowflakes to be light blue and glittery. So I'm spreading this out and then just scraping the top layer off. I am not putting it back, whatever's left, back into the jar, because it could easily have turned blue. So I wanted to keep my jarred color pristine. So, and then you just peel it off, and now I've let it dry overnight. So next day, now I'm ready to assemble my card. So I've got my card base, and this is going to be the exact same design. So off camera, I've made my wreath and stamped it, and it's all ready to go. So I'm just going to show you the quick assembly. So I'm putting this card panel down. I really like the way those snowflakes turned out. They're so pretty. And then I'm going to place my wreath down. And the Merry on top of that. And then the Christmas and the bow as well. And I've colored the bow with Stickles. So we'll get that attached. So all of these supplies, with the exception of the snowflake stencil, are available in my online store. You can go to the URL in the upper right corner of your screen, and I will make a list of supplies with links in the description below. And keep in mind, the oxide inks are expected next week in stock, and the glitter gels are expected either end of November or first week of December. They'll be back in stock. Ranger's having, from what I understand, a supply issue. So we'll get those in, and they'll be available for you to buy. So this is the finished card. I like the way that turned out. I love the way that the wreath pops on that light blue snowflake background. So I appreciate you watching my video today. If you haven't subscribed yet, please hit that subscribe button. And thanks for watching.